Welcome to the Manders Mindset Podcast. Here you'll find both monologue and interviews of entrepreneurs, coaches, healers, and a variety of other people, where your host Amanda Russo will discuss her own mindset and perspective and her guest mindset and perspective on the world around us. Manders and her guests will help explain to you how shifting your mindset will shift your life.
Welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Hollis and Scott Sunderland. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I highly recommend starting there because we covered some powerful insights on mindset, on transformation, and on breaking free from limiting beliefs. Last time we ended, Scott left us with this powerful thought about taking small steps towards progress. And I think it's the perfect way to start today's episode. So let's pick up right there.
I would say it's not the weight. It's not the paralysis. It's not the cancer. It's not whatever the doctor tells you it is. It's your mind. It is that voice inside your mind that is creating whatever that is. Whatever that wound is, that's why you're going through the weight. That's why you're going through whatever the doctor tells you it is. And I think when we are really gentle with ourselves, and I remember, I forget who it was, but I remember talking to somebody and I said, just get in the car. Just get in the car. There was a woman we worked with. She could not leave her apartment. She was so ill, she could not leave her apartment. And she came on one of the calls and she said, I crawled out my front door. I crawled down the steps, hands and knees in snow. And not a year later, she said, I was in the woods and I camped by myself. And there was like 2 feet of snow and I made it. Because that's literally what it takes sometimes. So sometimes it's not about going to the gym. It's just getting in the car to go to the gym because it's hard. You're overcoming a habit that isn't like, it's not a donut habit. It's not an ice cream habit. It's a habit of you. It's who you have become your whole life. And now you're going to fight that and think, oh, well, I'll just go to gym. Well, January 1st, I'm going for 4 hours. And then the next day, the 2nd, I'm just going to do 2. I'm going to do legs for 2 hours. I'll probably lose, I'm thinking 2.5 pounds, right? That's about right. And then I'm thinking the 3rd, I'll take the day off. I'll just run around the house like 27 times. And then on the 4th, I'll go back and I'm going to do, that's going to be my marathon. I'll do 6 hours. Bro, you ain't getting out of bed. On the 2nd, you're not going to get out of bed because you're going to say, I can't do that. Yeah. But you can get out of bed and then you can walk across the floor. Then you can go to the bathroom. Then you can get in the car. And then you can say, you know what? I did something today. That's winning. And listen, if that's where it has to start, then that's where it has to start. But you have to find that strength in you to say, I did good today. I did good today. I could have sat on the couch or never got out of bed, but I got out of bed. I could have sat there and never took a shower. I went in the shower. I got a shower. I did good today. And chances are the next day you'll go further.
That's right.
So, yeah.
It's so true. I'd love to transition a tad. Now, you guys developed a modality, and I'd love if you could walk me through it a little bit, the Quadrant Theory.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little backstory on how it came about. We, continued coaching. We were working with our friend. And then at one point, I was really passionate about working with women specifically because of what my journey and what I'd been through.
She broke up with us. I'm doing my own thing. She shipped. I got to prove.
True. Yes, I needed to prove, there's a ton of benefits, but a ton of, not disadvantages, but in working with partners, there's a lot of advantages, but it can be challenging as well. And I was at a place in my life where I was where actually a lot of billionaires are at. And that's, I need to prove myself. I need to prove that I'm worthy and and that's what drives a lot of very wealthy people. That doesn't mean that drives them to happiness. It means it drives them to, I have to prove something. And so that was part of it. But I also was like, I really wanted to work with women because I knew the journey I went through, and I knew there was other women out there that were like me, that was like, wait a minute, you sold me a pile of poop. This isn't this isn't what you said it would be. And as women, we become martyrs really easy. We become moms and wives. We completely lose ourselves. And at that point, I was like, you know what? I broke up with them. And so we all three did sort of our own coaching for a couple years. And then Scott and I decided, well, maybe we should try to do something together again. At that point, I was sort of reaching a point of burnout, trying to grow a business. You're coaching people, but then you're also the business owner and trying to grow a business.
And you're also going through it yourself.
And you're also, doing your own inner work. So it was a lot. And I was trying to grow a business from a proving standpoint as opposed from a super aligned. I would say it started out super aligned, and so I was really getting burnout. Him and I hadn't been to like any retreat or workshop for a while. And I said, we need to go do something for us. We need to, go to a workshop. We ended up finding a ketamine-assisted mindfulness retreat in Pennsylvania. And we didn't know what ketamine was, but we jump in at first to things. And so we talked to the lady about it. It sounded great, Bradley. We went and
Can you explain what ketamine is?
Absolutely. So ketamine is anesthetic. So they use ketamine in emergency rooms to do like quick surgeries without having to put someone under general anesthesia because they will keep breathing on their own. So they developed it during the Vietnam War so that they could work on soldiers out in the field for pain relief. And so they could do things really quickly so they wouldn't remember or feel it. So they use it in the emergency rooms every single day.
I used it for that. I didn't know, but I was getting it for a dislocated shoulder.
And they use it on 3-month-old babies. Like
Yeah,
this, it's probably has the biggest safety profile of all prescription medication. Super high safety profile. So what they found in the last really 10 years is the effects that it was having on people with treatment-resistant anxiety and depression. And they were like, it seemed like almost instantly, as opposed to people who are on antidepressants for months and months and it doesn't do anything. It seemed within a few sessions that people were better and that they didn't need to keep taking their antidepressants. And so then they started to do a lot more research on, okay, let's look at what ketamine is actually doing in the brain. Let's see why this is happening. And what they notice is at smaller doses, it has this sort of psychedelic type effect. Now, it's different than most psychedelics because most psychedelics that you say are natural, right? They come from the ground. They're a lot harder to dose. And so this was a little bit different in that case, but people were still having psychedelic experiences and then noticing they were coming out. And so ketamine is now being used widely all over the country in clinics for treatment-resistant anxiety and depression. It's having massive benefits. They're understanding that, in the brain, it's creating neuroplasticity. Now, mind you, him and I had been going to these Dr. Joe Dispenza retreats like crazy the first couple of years we met. And what Dr. Joe Dispenza is teaching with meditation is the power of neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to change. So when we're talking about identity and losing weight, right? You're like, I actually had to become somebody else. I didn't think the same way at 70 pounds less than I was thinking the same way when I was, had that weight. And that is, they believed forever that the brain was hardwired, you can't change. And then they discovered neuroplasticity. Actually, yeah, you can change in your brain. Your brain can change. And we've been learning about this through Dr. Joe and practicing meditation for years.
So it was working for us.
The effects of ketamine did work for us. And so...
But I mean, it was working for us just in meditation.
Exactly.
But then we would watch all these other people. They would not be able to have that same effect.
Yeah.
And it was like, maybe their trauma was greater, maybe whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
So it was like when we went to this, this retreat and we experienced it, as soon as I experienced it, I could see the names of every single person that this could change it. This could actually get them where I've been able to get to, where she's been able to get to, where many people have been able to get to, but the ones that just couldn't get over the hill, this is it. This is what can help them. So then,
Yeah, so you can think of it as, many of your listeners maybe have heard this example before. They use it with traditional psychedelics. But again, ketamine is not, out of all of them, it's not a traditional psychedelic. It's only an hour long. It's highly dosable. So when you're dealing with other kinds of psychedelics, it's really hard to dose. And you don't have any purging. There's no really side effects after.
no addiction.
No addiction. Actually is helping people get over addiction. And so what happened was, we experienced this and we went, oh my gosh, like this can help those people that would reach a wall. They were doing all the work, but they would reach a wall and they couldn't. So the example I was going to tell you is like, if you think of thought patterns in our brain as sled hills, and if you're going over this sled hill, you're going over the same sled hill over and over, eventually that sled hill is going to get really deep, and you're going to be so deep in it that you're like, shit, I don't even realize there's a million other sled hills on the mountain because I'm so deep down in this one. And what psychedelics does is basically fill that sled hill up with snow so that you can get out of it and then be able to look around. So like the example that the woman gave us when she was telling us about the retreat, she said, ketamine is like if you're walking through a forest and you're completely lost because there's trees everywhere, you have no idea which way is out. Ketamine in the brain is basically pulling you up above that forest so that you can see clearly which way is out, so that when you come back out of the experience, you actually know the direction out. And so that is what ketamine is doing in the brain. It's allowing you to get out of thought patterns that aren't serving you anymore. And getting out of thought patterns is due to neuroplasticity. And what does that do? That helps you to become a new person. It helps you to not be the depressed person. Well, the difference between what Scott and I decided to do after that retreat, because we need to implement this into the stuff that we're already doing, was ketamine clinics are not bringing in a deeper esoteric spiritual wisdom that we have both studied for a long time and sort of marrying those two. And that's what we decided we wanted to do. We wanted to do something different with the ketamine experience. And so we wanted to work with people that already had some practices, that already had been doing some inner work, but they were stuck and they couldn't get past that wall. And we saw the benefits of ketamine being able to do that. So we came back from that retreat. We decided we're going to stop any coaching courses we'd been doing, and we're really just going to focus on retreats because we'd already been doing those anyway. And we're going to incorporate the breath work, and we're going to incorporate meditation, and then we're going to incorporate ketamine therapy. And we did that for about 8 months. And in that time, Scott and I were also personally working with the medicine in our own personal lives. And it reconnected us both to sort of maybe what we kind of lost for a while, which is that deeper connection, the thing that brought him and I together. And so we were kind of focused on that. And then one day I ended up I watch a lot of podcasts. And I watched one by a lady by the name of Jill Bolte Taylor. And she has one of the most watched TED Talks on TED about her stroke. And during her stroke, her whole left side of her brain went offline. So she had no use of her left side of the brain, only the right side. Well, basically, the right side of the brain is you can think of as no identity. So think of the identity lives in the left side of the brain. Amanda lives in the left side of her brain. That's who you are. That exists in the left side of your brain. The right side of your brain, you could say, is the spiritual side. It's the side of the brain that, so she couldn't walk or move or feed herself because there was no separation between the end of her finger and everything else. So literally everything was like energy, and she was in complete ecstatic bliss. She was in joy. But after a while she said, well, I'm probably going to experience this when I die. So maybe the point is to have an ego, because granted, she didn't have any memory of her past. She didn't really know who Jill was. And so she decided over the next 7 years to sort of bring the left side of her brain back online. She had to train herself to bring that part of her brain back online. And so through that experience, she discovered she's a neuroanatomist. So she actually studies the anatomy of the brain. And I had known a lot about the brain because of what we had studied in my breathwork course. I learned a lot about what happens in the brain and the different parts of it. And basically she broke down she calls them the 4 characters of the brain. And as I was listening to that, it's, when you listen to someone, it feels like it's just filling in a puzzle. Like it felt like it filled in this puzzle, and all of these things that I had studied and we'd been practicing and teaching, I saw them fit within what we now call the 4 quadrants that went much deeper than just these characters she was talking about. And so I started talking to Scott about it. And for a month, I was just writing and we were talking, and we could see how these different aspects of these very deep teachings, it was like everything in the world, actually, everything we experience fits within these 4, what we call quadrants. And so maybe explain to her the tanks and how
So, and what she means by, all things in the world, you can map what we call map. I can map Amanda. I can tell you in what quadrant you're most dominant, your dominant quadrant is. And, you could look at the quadrants as seasons, winter, summer, fall, spring. You can look at them as astrological. It goes on and on. So elements. So basically, if you picture 4 big water tanks, and they're all square, they're all tied together, but they don't connect to each other. And there's one big pipe that comes in, and it's supposed to go to the center and fill each tank equally as it fills the other tanks. But what happens is...
So all tanks are balanced.
All tanks are balanced. That's the goal. That's what's supposed to happen. But as we talked about before, the parent-child wound, are growing up. The tank, the regulator that controls the water flow into these tanks gets stuck, and one gets filled while the other ones go empty. So what ketamine does is it unsticks that regulator. So then all tanks get filled. And suddenly it's hard to explain. I guess you could probably explain it better. Like a quadrant 1 is...
So quadrant 1 would be the aspect. So the element of quadrant 1 is earth. The season is spring. So you can think of quadrant 1 as the aspect of you, or the aspect of the season that's like the doer. That's like the leader. So we also use Carl Jung psychology within each quadrant. We use the archetypes. He uses 12 archetypes that he says these 12 archetypes exist throughout human history. We use these archetypes in our movies, in our stories, in our mythologies. Like these 12 archetypes represent every part of every human that was ever alive. And so we actually were able to map those 12 archetypes within each of these quadrants. So the quadrant 1 is the rebel, is the leader. So if you're in quadrant, the feeling when you're like really confident,
yeah,
and you're like, I can go get shit done. It's the analyzer also,
yeah,
the entrepreneur, the critical thinker. So you're in this season and you're in the element of sturdiness. This is the ego, is quadrant 1.
So think of, so quadrant 1, the season is spring. So think about spring. What happens in spring? We come out of winter, and now plants are starting to, come out of the earth, right? Flowers are coming out. They have to push up and out. They have to do. Okay. It's not just basking in the sun, which would be quadrant 3, right? So 3 is...
So quadrant 3 would be, so it's the emotional limbic system of the right side of your brain. So it's basically like the playful child. The element's fire. So if you think of fire, in Jungian psychology, it's the gesture, the adventure. So if you think the part of you that you're being really playful, like you're feeling fiery, think of a little kid that's dancing and they're just like, they don't care. They don't care about, it's summer. It's like, summer. We're having fun.
We're having fun.
We don't have responsibilities. We're just going to be playful. It's it's very present. So you're not thinking in the past or the future. It's very present. It's very playful. It is all about adventure into the unknown. It's really about community because, people who are natural born into quadrant 3, they're very playful. They're comedians. They are very charismatic. So that would be quadrant 3. Quadrant 4 it's an air sign and it's fall. So it's like universal connectedness, universal consciousness. It's wisdom. It's being connected to everything. It's like when you have an experience when you're in flow. I use the example of athletes. They say when they're in flow, it's like they aren't doing anything. It's just happening through them. That is the
Musicians.
That's quadrant 4. It's like you lose all sense of the ego, of the identity. You are not that. You are connecting with something deeper. These are deep states of meditation. In breathwork, you reach these states. And then down in quadrant 2, which is the left side of the limbic system, the left emotional side, that is where our memories exist. That is where the wounds, the first 7 years. And so this is like the wounded inner child, but this is also representative of the winter, of rest, of going within, of going internally. And so the whole purpose of the quadrant theory on the first level is bringing balance to all of these parts of ourselves. Because what Scott and I noticed, not just in our coaching of other people, but in ourselves, a lot of times these get compartmentalized as if that's the only thing. Like you could say the personal development, Tony Robbins' face is a quadrant 1 dominant, but it's all about do. But that can overpower that wounded child, the quadrant 2, if there needs to be some deeper work done, right? And then if you're going over to the left side of the brain and quadrant 3 and 4, that's surrender. That's like, I'm going to let something bigger happen through me. So what we realized in this, leveling those tanks is the most important thing. All 4 seasons are equally as important. And so what we were able to walk people through and what we do now is number 1, looking at, okay, how do I know who I'm being when I'm in each of these quadrants? What are my thoughts? What are my feelings? What are my actions? So I'm very clear, the awareness part, right? I'm very clear, like, I'm balanced in my quadrant 1 or I'm not. I'm burnt out. I'm whatever, right? And so we help them understand when they're balanced and when they're not, and then how to move through these cycles more easily.
What's more important than knowing where you are is where your spouse is.
Yeah.
So when you're having a conversation problem with your spouse, you may be in quadrant 1 when they are in quadrant 2. And it becomes a friction. I don't understand. Why can't you do this? I'm out there doing this and working and getting all this shit done. And all you're doing is sitting on the couch saying that you're going to go to the gym every day. Right. And when you understand where your spouse is, then you understand, because each quadrant, this is huge though, you can't bypass a quadrant. It's like saying, well, you know what? I just decided. I say there should be spring and summer. That's it. No more fall, no more winter. It's off the table. Let's write it out, right? So each quadrant is necessary, because when you have summer, you need rest. Bears, they hibernate. They go in. Why? Because they are working so hard to keep this massive body filled with nourishment. So they have to hunt. They have to, right? So in the winter, they hibernate. They go to sleep. We need that. Our bodies need rest. That's why we sleep. That's why we get comfortable mattresses, so we can rest, right? So when you know that your partner, even though you may be in quadrant 1, or maybe you're in quadrant 3, when you know that your partner is in quadrant 2 and they are in rest, you have a totally different understanding. And they have a different understanding. So what we started to realize is working as a couple in this, because we thought, how could this change relationships? When she's in a hole, I realize she's in quadrant 2. I got to back off. I have to let her be in quadrant 2, because I know I have been in quadrant 2. I know what that feels like. So now I know that's where she is. I need to give her space. I need to rest, let her rest. And when she is like, I don't know why, but I don't have any energy right now. I don't have any drive right now. The last 2 days, I've been just laying around. Instead of beating herself up, she now knows.
I'm in winter.
I'm in the winter right now. I'm in hibernation. I'm in rest. I'm in quadrant 2.
And I can nurture myself.
And she can nurture herself. And she can also know, well, what happens when you're in quadrant 2? I'm resting, so I'm going to come out of it. And where am I going to go? right? I'm going to go in either into 3 or I'm going into 1. Maybe I go into 4. Maybe I use 4 to help me get out of 2. So it's a whole thing.
It's a framework, basically, for how to navigate your entire life and every area of it. And it goes deep. When we're teaching a class, we're teaching about the biology and the chemistry that's happening in your body within each quadrant. So actually what chemicals are being released to help you to really anchor in. I mean, self-awareness is everything.
Huge.
So it's giving you a map of your own self-awareness to go, okay, number one, I'm going to have more compassion and less self-judgment if I trust these cycles and I learn how to move through them naturally. And it really is, it's fundamentally shifted our lives. And now we've taken other people through the process. I think that is our best work yet. To be honest with you, I think it's our best work yet. It feels so deep, yet so big.
Yeah.
Okay. And now, in this framework, what's the best way for people listening to us to try to implement it?
So actually, I just did a webinar yesterday teaching about the 3 levels. So I'll give you a very brief thing so your listeners actually have something to walk away from. Number 1, we have a mini series on our YouTube channel that breaks down each quadrant. So you can listen to those videos and it's a breakdown. So you can understand the characteristics and the traits of each quadrant. From there, you're going to want to make your own personal map, right? And that map is going to include what thoughts, feelings, and actions do I do when I'm balanced and when I'm imbalanced in each quadrant, right? So for example, quadrant 3. If I'm balanced in quadrant 3, it means I can still be playful. I can be spontaneous. I can be surrendered. So I'm not trying to push or force or control anything. That's balanced in quadrant 3. I know when I feel that in my body. I can feel the chemistry. I know the thoughts I'm thinking. If I start to get imbalanced, then I become irresponsible. Then I'm like, I really don't want to do anything. I don't want anyone to want anything from me. You can sort of get stagnant and then you become almost like a rebel without a cause, that you're just like, I'm trying to avoid any responsibility, right? So that's how I know I'm imbalanced. Okay. Do that for any of the quadrants, right? You can do that for any one. So from there, you have the map. And then the second map would be, okay, what activities can help me stay balanced in each of these? So what are some activities that trigger each of these quadrants that I can implement into my daily life? And then if I'm imbalanced, like he said, all right, if I'm 2 days in quadrant 2 and I'm allowing myself to just rest, because most of us don't allow that, and I'm allowing myself to just be on the downhill, because when you go from states of flow, your body can't maintain that because there's a lot dopamine and norepinephrine that gets released and your body can't maintain that. It has to go on the come down. And so the most important part is not to bypass the come down, to be in it. However, you can get stuck down there and imbalanced, right? That's what we talked about at the beginning. So then recognizing, all right, I'm probably need to move myself out of the cycle. I'm not naturally rising out of it. I'm sort of getting stuck in it. And so then you would have specific activities for each of those to get yourself out of it. Very quick inversion.
Okay. Love that. Can you give me your link to the YouTube? I will link that in the...
Absolutely. Yep. It's a mini series. So we go through, like I said, the description of all 4 quadrants. That I'll share that with you. So then you can really go to get a good idea. And the thing is, these affect every area of your life because every quadrant represents a different part of your life. So relationships would be quadrant 2 because that's your emotions and you're dealing with relationships. Your business would be quadrant 1. So that's more of your entrepreneur and leadership. Your play would be quadrant 3. And a lot of times that's going to have to do with physical activity as well, is your quadrant 3. And your connection is quadrant 4. It's every area of your life.
Can the quadrants overlap?
Absolutely. And there are many things that you can do to activate all of them, right? And so we talk a lot when we go deeper. So this is sort of the level 1 surface level. In the class, we take it much deeper, but there's things that you can do actually to activate all 4. We teach about your natural born quadrant, which is like your gifts and your purpose. You know, that's sort of the deeper levels. But I think for now, just people understanding, you know, the surface level of just how to start applying that to your life.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Wow. That is so fascinating.
It is.
Wow. Well, my. I love that. No, it makes a lot of sense how it can apply to literally everything. And when you said emotions, I know that is relationships, but my mind was like, emotions can play into other areas.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you guys so much for speaking with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for letting us share all of this.
Yeah, of course. Now, have you guys heard of a man named Jay Shetty?
Love to share.
Little bit.
So he has a podcast. He ends his podcast with 2 segments, and I've started incorporating them into mine. And first segment is the many sides to us. Scott, you want to go first?
Sure. I don't know what he does. So again, yeah.
You don't have to. These are questions about you. I just
Yeah, man, I am totally there. I'm ready.
give him credit. Everybody always asks me, where'd you come up with these? I'm like, it's not me. It's not me.
Then my answers, they won't be me. They're just going to come from wherever they come from. Okay.
That is fine too. First segment is the many sides to us. There's 5 questions, and they need to be answered in 1 word each.
1 word.
Okay. That's almost impossible. Go ahead.
What is 1 word someone who was meeting you for the first time would use to describe you as?
Confident.
What is 1 word that someone who knows you extremely well would use to describe you as?
Heart-centered.
What is 1 word you'd use to describe yourself?
Playful.
What is 1 word that if someone didn't like you or agree with your mindset would use to describe you as?
Oh, wow. Crazy.
What is 1 word you're trying to embody right now?
Wow.
Authenticity.
Oh, that's
Did I steal your stuff?
Second segment is the final 5, and these can be answered in a sentence. What is the best advice you've heard or received?
It's not out there. It's in here.
Why is that the best?
Because it leaves it up to you. It's not going to be anybody else's fault. It's yours. And again, if it's my fault, I can fix it, right? If it's my wrong, I can right it. And if it's my right, I can live it. So I don't need anybody else to, I know we all do. We all like to look out there and blame somebody, whether it's an ex, whether it's a government, whether it's, whoever. But ultimately, we hold our own destiny within inside us.
I love that. What is the worst advice you've heard or received?
Get a job. No. Wow. Yeah, probably like you have to conform. You have to, whatever, authority. Like you have to listen to authority. You have to conform to the rules. I'm a bit of a not a rule breaker. I'm a rule redefiner. So.
I like that word. A rule redefiner. Okay.
Redefine.
Why is that the worst advice?
Because it takes away your self-sovereignty. I believe a lot of people have lost themselves because they haven't followed their own self-sovereignty. They haven't listened to their own words. And I will tell you this, as being the older gentleman that I am now, I still think I'm 16. I'm just saying. But the age says something else. There is probably no greater emotion than regret. Regret is devastating. So, don't listen to people that say you can't, because ultimately, if you listen to them, you're saying you can't.
Yeah, that's so true. What is something that you used to value that you no longer value?
Oh, God, everything. Things. I had all things. You name it, I had it. Boats, cars, fishing rods, train sets, you name it, I had it all because I thought all those things would make me happy. I now live in a 400 square foot RV, which we get to travel and see not the world because we would be amphibious, but we get to see everywhere, in the United States. We've been so many different places and experienced so many different things. And I've realized it was never those things that defined me. And I look at so many people get lost in all the things that end up defining who they think they are.
If you could describe what you would want your legacy to be as if someone was reading it, what would you want it to say?
The courage to be wrong. Courage to be wrong.
If you could create one law in the world that everyone had to follow, what would it be? And I want to know why.
Okay, so we're going to have to repeat that one again.
If you could create one law that everyone had in the world had to follow, what would it be? And why?
Wow. It's a hard one to define, I guess, is what I'm thinking right now, is the power to learn the power that they are, to really realize the strength that they are. Because again, I think that lends to every other answer, right? It's being self-aware, self-motivated, knowing that maybe the purpose that you're here is just to be here. But I think ultimately to live authentically and be proud of who you are no matter what you are, because there's quadrants and people get stuck in quadrants. People get stuck in quadrant 2 a lot. People get stuck in quadrant 4 a lot. So I think it's, the courage to change, not necessarily worry about what everybody else is going to define you as. Find your own definition of yourself. Is that the answer to that question? Did I answer it?
I think so.
I answered it without 30 sentences or paragraphs.
That's okay. Well, you got a preview, but so first segment, many sides to us. What is one word someone who was meeting you for the first time would describe you as?
Friendly.
Sure.
What is one word someone who knows you extremely well would use to describe you?
Authentic.
What is one word you'd use to describe yourself?
Deep.
What is one word that if someone didn't like you or agree with your mindset would use to describe you as?
I can think of two, but I'll say cold.
What is one word that you're trying to embody right now?
Well, I was going to say authenticity.
Can't have that.
No,
I used it.
I would say embodiment itself, embodiment, mastery. There you go. Mastery.
Okay. Final 5. What is the best advice you've heard or received?
The best advice I heard or received was,
Obviously, something
are
I said.
you proud of yourself? That it was by Diana Nyad, who if that moment shifted everything in my life. She was on an interview with Oprah. She broke the record from swimming to Cuba to Florida at like 67 years old. She had 5 previous attempts. She did it. And she was talking to Oprah, and Oprah said, "How amazing, you world record, and she said, "I don't care about any of that. I ask myself every day, if tomorrow's my last day, am I proud of my life? Am I proud of the life I'm living?" And in that moment, I wasn't practicing what I was preaching. I wasn't living a full life. I was on the bleachers wishing I was down in the arena. And so that moment fundamentally stuck with me. Like, I need to live my life so I am proud of my life, that I did everything, that I pushed myself to do everything. And that led me to everything. Everything.
What is the worst advice you've heard or received?
That is probably something I said.
Don't move across the country with this man you don't know.
This is true. That's true.
That's probably the worst advice.
Yeah, that is very true.
I'm assuming that's about Scott. Somebody told you that about Scott.
And I thank God didn't listen.
Yeah. Or you don't know that person.
Yep. Yeah. Thank God I didn't listen.
That's right.
That's the worst advice.
What is something that you used to value that you no longer value?
Other people's opinion.
If you could describe what you would want your legacy to be as if someone was reading it, what would you want it to say?
I guess I'm kind of confused by that question. Like, what do I want my legacy to be? Like, what do I want to inspire in others?
Yeah, if someone was like reading about you, what would you want it to say?
Gotcha. Bravery, courage, bravery and courage to think and live outside of the box, to be brave enough to go, there might be something different than what everyone's been doing.
If you could create one law in the world that everyone had to follow, what would it be and why?
I was thinking this when I've heard this on Jay Shetty so many times, and I always wondered what my answer would be. And even as you asked him, I was wondering, and I was going through some different things, and I've heard some great answers like be kind, and but that's all perspective, because what is kind? What one person thinks is kind, someone else may not think is kind. So I was like, what is if one thing, like if everyone had to do this one thing that I think would shift, and I think it would be you cannot blame others for any problems in your life. Nobody could ever blame another person for problems in their life. I think that's the law that I would pass, because I think if we can't blame others, you fundamentally shift everything. Everything shifts because we take our power, our own power back, and we go, oh my God, I am more powerful than I thought. And it wipes out all of that old conditioning that I'm whatever, I'm a stupid girl, I'm a stupid boy, I'm incapable, no one likes me. It wipes all of that out, because if you can't blame someone else, you go, well, I can do all of that.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that law. Wow. Well, thank you guys so much for speaking with me. I really appreciate it.
Us too. Thank you so much. I hope your listeners got lots of value from that today.
Oh my gosh, I'm sure they did.
Yeah. We like to talk.
I know. So do I. And no pressure, but any final words for the listeners? I do just like to always leave it back to the guest.
I don't know if that's a good idea. No.
Yeah.
Scott, any final words? Final words, Scott.
It exists. It exists for you. So go find it. I mean, it is whatever you're looking for, happiness, whatever it is.
For
I
sure.
promise you,
Yeah.
as someone who's been in both sides, it exists for you. So I always end everything with go find it. Go find it.
I love that. Well, thank you. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Mander's Mindset. Thank you so much for listening to part 2 of my conversation with M. Hollis and Scott Sunderland. I really hope you enjoyed the second half of their journey and diving more deep in it with me and them as well. If you want to delve down M's journey a little more deeper, I encourage you to check out her episode on breathwork magic. That is linked in the show notes as well. I also want to leave you guys with a few key takeaways from part 2 of the episode with Em and Scott. First of all, mindset shapes our reality. It's not about the weight, the illness, or the diagnosis. It's about your mind creating the experience. Transformation starts with small wins. Sometimes it's just about getting in the car, not forcing yourself into big changes overnight. Like Scott said, you're not going to lose 3 pounds on the treadmill, because you're not. And you're not going to get your PhD tomorrow if you haven't taken a college class. Let's be realistic. Next key takeaway is about breaking old patterns, because it is very hard to do, because you're not just breaking a habit. You are breaking the identity that created that habit. Many people fail because they try to change everything at once. I've talked about this quite a bit, but sustainable transformation happens one step at a time, step by step. Then Em and Scott shared about the Quadrant Theory, a framework for life, and how we all operate on 4 quadrants. And how we all operate through 4 quadrants. The first quadrant is spring and earth, the doer, the leader, the entrepreneur in us. Quadrant 2 is winter and water for the element, our inner child, emotions, and healing. Quadrant 3 is summer and the element fire, the playful self, creativity, adventure. Quadrant 4 is fall, or the element air, the spiritual self, wisdom, universal flow. And Emmett Scott emphasized that balance is key and you really need all 4 quadrants to thrive. Being able to understand which is your dominant quadrant will help you navigate life and relationships better. Then they talked about ketamine and rewiring the brain, and how ketamine is being used for treatment-resistant anxiety and depression. It creates neuroplasticity, helping people to break free from deeply ingrained thought patterns. When ketamine is combined with breathwork and mindset work, it can be a powerful tool for transformation. They also emphasized how personal responsibility is everything. It's key. So many people stay stuck because they believe they have to conform to societal expectations. True change happens when you stop blaming others and take full responsibility for your life. The power to shift your reality is already within you. So what are you waiting for? Until next time. In case no one told you today, I'm proud of you. I'm rooting for you. And you got this. As always, if you enjoyed the show, I would really appreciate it if you would leave me a 5-star rating, leave a review, and share it with anyone you think would benefit from this. And don't forget, you are only one mindset shift away from shifting your life. Thanks, guys. Until next time.